Big news out of Toronto, Craig Berube in as the team's new head coach. But what will that mean on the ice for the Maple Leafs? David Morassutti of Locked On Leafs is here to talk about that and the offseason ahead next on the Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you can get new episodes as soon as they drop. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the co-host of Locked On Maple Leafs, David Morassutti, and big news over the weekend, David, new coach in Toronto, Craig Berube. Your initial thoughts on this hire?
Not surprising considering he was viewed as a leading candidate right from the start. I mean, if you look at even the betting odds on FanDuel, he was like number one, even when it was when they made the move to get rid of to fire Sheldon Keefe. So not overly surprising, and it kind of aligns to, I think, the direction that this team wants to go.
So when you say the direction this team wants to go, in what way?
I think just, you know what, this is a team that's failed to get over the hump far too much, and general manager Brad Living said we need a new voice, and when he said that, I don't think that was too much of a shot at Keefe in terms of his coaching style. I think Keefe is a good coach. The results in the regular season speak for themselves. But the playoffs are another animal, and you really need that coach that's going to be able to get that little extra more out of the players and get them ready for the playoffs, right? The playoff moment, making sure they understand the standard that they need to play with right from the start of the season to then coming into the playoffs, because we hear all the time the playoffs are different, right? It's a different animal. And personally, I think the issue with the Leafs is that they play one way in the regular season, and in the playoffs they try to play a totally different style. That doesn't work. You need to be a consistent team from the start of the year to the playoffs, establish your identity, and I feel like that's something they didn't really do well, and I think Craig Berube will really hone that in right from training camp. I think the honesty he'll bring. They always say the country club atmosphere in Toronto is going to be gone under Craig Berube. We'll see how much of that holds true. But I do think that they need someone that's going to really get this group to play how they need to play right from the start of the season.
So the old cliche about coaching changes is you always add a coach who's kind of the opposite of the guy you just let go. In what ways do you think that Craig Berube fits that mold right now?
I think he's going to make this team accountable when they don't bring the effort, right? Sheldon Keefe at times, like, I went back and watched the old Amazon documentary from when they played in the bubble in 2021 and 2021, and that was a coach who definitely was trying to get the players to accountable with how they're playing. But it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to do it. And if a player doesn't do what needs to be done, Craig Berube is not going to hesitate to call them out or do other things that are going to make the player realize that the standard isn't good enough, right? When they don't have a good night. There's been too many times where this team has taken opponents lower in the standings not seriously, and it's led to an embarrassing loss, and they look uninspired and things like that. That's not going to happen under Craig Berube. Craig Berube is going to make sure that this team is every night they know what they need to do. They're going to have to bring an effort every single night. I wouldn't say that they didn't do it under Sheldon Keefe, but you could tell that there were times where they needed someone to rein it in a little bit more, and Keefe wasn't really doing that for this group.
Is there one or two players that you feel will benefit most from the change in style that Berube is going to bring?
I'm kind of hoping that it's on the back end. I want to see Morgan Rielly. Like we talk a lot. Everyone's going to probably bring up Matthews, Nylander. I think Morgan Rielly is someone that needs that tough coaching. He's had good moments in his career, but I feel like this was a down year for him, and he's their most important defenseman. I think he's someone that needs to kind of get his game to a different stage where he needs to be more on the positive side of things that are happening on this team, right? And so I think he's one, depending on what changes are made going into the offseason. I think William Nylander is another player that's going to be him and Berube. I'm curious to see how that dynamic's going to work, because Nylander is not exactly, Craig Berube style player, let's just say. But I think given that he's signed here long term, the Leafs aren't exactly in a position to move him. I think he's going to be a player that's going to have to take a different approach to how he plays. I think Berube is going to be pushing that on him.
Obviously, there's been talk of changes to the core of the Maple Leafs, not necessarily being able to keep all four of the big four. What, if any, changes do you see on the roster, and how does the coaching change influence those?
I really wonder what happens with Mitch Marner. If let's say they don't trade Mitch Marner, he's someone I think that Craig Berube is going to be. There's going to be some. That's another player. I wonder if him and Berube are going to be able to mix well, because Marner's not exactly. I wouldn't say he's not good with criticism, because we don't know too much of how he's dealt with criticism. But I wonder, will Berube try to get him to play the way that he is capable of when the pressure's on, right? That's when this team is really struggles, when the pressure's on. So I just don't see with him needing a new contract and the team just not having enough money to sign all these guys. Marner seems like it has been the odd man out in a lot of scenarios with what the Leafs do. So I think his status is something I think a lot of people will be keeping an eye on. I think he gets moved just because it's a numbers game. They don't have the money to. I mean, they have the money. It's just not feasible to have so many guys making over, $11 million. You can't pay. I can't see this team having four forwards making $11 million past next season, right? So I think he's one. John Tavares, I think there's an opportunity where you consider it, but you also have to think about he's not a guy that's going to look to make more in the next contract. He is likely going to take less, especially if he wants to stay in Toronto. So I think he's someone that I would think twice before moving, just because of that reason. Maybe just for the 1 year, you say, okay, we got him for this year. Let's see if we can make it work, and then visit how we can take some of that money that he would have made or he's making now and put it towards other part of the roster.
If they trade Marner, or let's just say whatever moves they make, what are they looking to get in return? What's the area they want to build up?
Oh, that blue line needs the most work. Right now they only have four defensemen signed. They got Rielly, McCabe, Timmins, and Benoit signed. That, to me, that's the biggest area of need that they need to fix. And I don't see them. I mean, Timmins could be a guy that gets moved just because, I don't know, he's making a lot of money for a player that doesn't play every day. So that's probably the biggest challenge that Brad Treliving has this offseason, is to get that blue line fixed. And also, I think they need to address center ice. They have, obviously, when you have Matthews and Tavares, that's a pretty good start. David Kampf had a down year, and he got a raise last year. Not exactly what you want to see in that situation, but I do think that they need to address. Those are the areas you need to address if you want to be a cup contender. Your depth down the middle and on the blue and in upgrading the blue line. I think those are two big areas.
All right, should be a very interesting offseason. I know you'll have it covered every step of the way. David, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Yeah, just go over to the Locked On Leafs podcast, wherever you get your podcast from, or subscribed on YouTube there. And also you can follow the show at Locked On Leafs, and you can follow my stuff over on X at @the_Morassutti.
David, thanks so much. Always a pleasure.
Appreciate it, Gil.
Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.